Sometimes a joke can change your entire life, especially when the one listening is an alien woman from across the galaxy. James had always thought of himself as someone capable of handling the absurdities of interstellar life with a wink and a smirk, the kind of man who could throw a sarcastic comment into a room of tense scientists and somehow diffuse the pressure like it was a malfunctioning plasma conduit. He sat slouched in a zero-gravity observation pod, one leg casually hooked over the edge of the chair, sipping what the station's kitchen insisted was coffee, but tasted more like burnt star dust mixed with recycled coolant. He glanced out the viewport at the swirling colors of the nearby nebula, thinking that at least the universe had good taste in aesthetics. "If he proposes, I'll say yes," he muttered under his breath, a half-joke aimed at no one in particular, more a reflection of his ongoing boredom than any serious commitment to cosmic romance. The observation deck hummed with quiet activity. Crew members floated past, anchored only by the magnetic boots that James had always found a bit too clingy for comfort. Screens blinked with telemetry data, and the occasional ping of a distant sensor reminded them that the station was alive, a living organism of metal and circuitry hurtling through the void. For James, the most challenging part of his job was pretending to care deeply about ion flux density readings while secretly daydreaming about simpler things, like the way Earth's rain smelled after a storm, or whether anyone in the Galactic Council had ever tried to play practical jokes on an artificial intelligence without starting an interplanetary incident. It was then that Kaelara entered his life, or more accurately, glided into the observation deck like she had stepped out of a dream someone had carefully coded. She was striking, almost human in her features, but with long, delicate ears that curved gracefully upward, almost as if sculpted from some ethereal silver. Her eyes shimmered with a subtle violet hue, and the soft light from the nebula danced across her skin in a way that made her appear almost luminescent. James blinked, coffee halfway to his lips, and thought, not for the first time, that he had absolutely no idea how to interact with someone like her. Kaelara's presence was commanding, yet playful, a juxtaposition that made James' nervous humor bubble to the surface. She approached him slowly, each step measured, yet somehow teasing, like she knew the joke he hadn't even fully made yet. His first instinct was to mutter something clever, but his mouth betrayed him with a weak, hi. She leaned closer, tilting her head slightly, the long tips of her ears brushing against the subtle hum of the observation pod's magnetic fields. "Will you be my husband?" she whispered, her voice soft but unmistakably intimate, almost vibrating in sync with the station's ambient frequency. James froze mid-sip, the coffee hovering precariously in the air as if gravity itself was confused by the sudden charge in the room. His brain attempted to process the statement, which felt absurd, hilarious, terrifying, and intoxicating all at once. "Well, he stammered, blinking like a malfunctioning camera sensor. I mean that's sudden." Kaelara's smile was a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "I find that most human reactions to sudden proposals are entertaining," she said, eyes glinting with humor. "Though I suspected you might appreciate a little levity before replying seriously." James coughed, nearly spraying stardust coffee onto the console. Levity, right? Because nothing says levity like being proposed to by a galactic diplomat who also happens to look like she walked straight out of a holoromance magazine. He chuckled nervously, his words floating in the zero-gravity air like metallic confetti. Kaelara laughed softly, a sound like wind chimes under alien suns, and it made James' heart trip over itself in a way that was entirely unhelpful for a man trying to maintain dignity. "What if I said yes?" he asked, leaning forward slightly, pretending to be casual, though the slight tilt of the observation pod betrayed him. Kaelara's ears twitched, a subtle motion that James soon realized was akin to a human raising an eyebrow in disbelief. "Would that be acceptable in your, societal framework?" Her laugh was musical, almost like an intricate algorithm of tones that should not exist in any human musical scale. "Your humor is charming, James. But yes, it would be acceptable. I value the courage in spontaneity, though I did not anticipate it in quite this form." James tried to imagine a cosmic spreadsheet tracking spontaneous interspecies proposals. He couldn't. Instead, he floated backward a little, letting gravity and embarrassment carry him into a corner, where he muttered, "I feel like I just accidentally walked into the punchline of a very expensive joke." Kaelara floated closer, deliberately ignoring the quip. "You underestimate the importance of laughter," she said. "Humor is a bridge even across species. I intend to build one with you." She extended a hand, which James noted with some astonishment looked perfectly human in its shape, though the subtle iridescence of her skin made him want to ask if touching it would result in a mild electric shock or a full-blown aurora. James, being James, took her hand anyway because somehow refusing would have been far too mundane. "So, you're proposing," he said with mock solemnity, "and we're bridging species with jokes." "Yes," she replied, her voice soft, playful, but with a gravity that made his ribcage tighten just a little. "And perhaps a little chaos, but mostly laughter." The next hours blurred together in a haze of floating mugs, misfired holograms, and awkward zero-G handshakes that ended with accidental spins. Kaelara proved to be a surprisingly good sport, laughing at herself when she collided with a floating data pad and teasing James when he managed to entangle himself in a cable meant to secure supplies. Humor, it seemed, was their common language, the only thing that made the suddenness of their connection bearable, even exhilarating. At one point, James attempted a proper question, the kind one might ask in the tentative stage of an interspecies engagement. "So, do you always do this? Whisper marriage proposals to strangers who make dumb jokes?" Kaelara paused, considering. "Only when they demonstrate potential. And your coffee spilling technique suggests a readiness for chaos, which is valuable." James laughed so hard that he nearly hit the ceiling, or at least his head almost kissed the magnetic padding designed to prevent such accidents. "Potential for chaos," he muttered, shaking his head. "I should put that on my resume. Expert in accidental zero-G disasters." Kaelara's ears twitched again, and she actually nodded, a gesture that seemed almost approving. As the station rotated gently through the void, bathed in the swirling colors of a nebula that seemed to wink at them, James realized that his life had irreversibly changed. He had entered the observation deck with a half-hearted joke, expecting nothing more than mild amusement, and now he was entwined in a thread of fate that spanned stars, species, and societal expectations he could barely comprehend. And yet, despite the absurdity, the humor, and the complete lack of preparation, he felt a spark of something he hadn't anticipated. Excitement, and perhaps the beginnings of something resembling hope. Hours passed, or was it minutes? Time had become slippery in zero gravity, especially when filled with laughter and awkward intimacy. Kaelara shared stories of her home world, where the oceans glowed with bioluminescent flora, and the concept of humor was considered the highest form of diplomacy. James countered with tales of Earth, where people thought slipping on banana peels was entertainment, and cats ruled the internet. At one point, they debated whether a human who could survive in zero gravity without floating into oblivion deserved a medal or just a warning label. By the time the station's artificial lighting dimmed for what they called sleep cycle, James had discovered that humor could indeed bridge incomprehensible differences. Kaelara's long ears twitched as she mimicked his exaggerated snore, and he pretended to retaliate with a gentle poke that sent both of them tumbling through the pod's magnetic fields in a fit of giggles. He thought about how ludicrous the situation was, how surreal, and yet how right it felt. Floating there, tangled in cables and laughter, James realized that the universe had delivered him a lesson wrapped in cosmic irony. Sometimes a joke is not just a joke. Sometimes it is a beginning, whispered in an alien voice, that sweeps you off your feet and into a story that will stretch across stars, hearts, and the uncharted territory of interspecies affection. And for the first time in a long while, he looked forward to the chaos, the jokes, and the whispers yet to come. The observation deck settled into silence, punctuated only by the soft hum of life support systems and the occasional glimmer of distant stars. James and Kaelara drifted side by side, a human man and an alien woman, connected by laughter, by a whispered question, and by the improbable spark of understanding that might just survive the vastness of space. Somewhere between jest and destiny, the first chapter of their story had begun, and the universe, predictably, seemed to be watching with a bemused grin. James woke to the soft hum of the station's life support system vibrating through the floor panels. Or maybe it was the hum in his own head after the night of zero-gravity entanglement with Kaelara. He floated upright, careful not to bump the walls, which always seemed to have a habit of sneaking up on him despite years of experience. The observation deck had emptied overnight, leaving only the faint glow of distant stars painting the walls in shades of violet and gold. Colors that always seemed impossibly wrong for Earth standards, but stunning in the alien palette of the nebula outside. He rubbed his eyes and caught movement at the far end of the pod, Kaelara, already awake, seated cross-legged in a way that defied all human concepts of comfort. Her long ears curved upward elegantly, like twin banners of some interstellar heraldry, as she tilted her head and regarded him with that mixture of curiosity and amusement that always made his chest do something indecipherable. "You're awake," she said, her voice carrying a musical lilt that seemed to harmonize with the soft, mechanical breathing of the station. "Yes," he replied cautiously, adjusting to the mild panic of remembering how yesterday's events had unfolded. "I survived a night of, zero-gravity cuddling chaos without significant injury, I think." He gestured vaguely at the magnetic restraints that had kept him half-tangled in his own blanket. Kaelara's laugh, soft but deliberate, echoed through the pod and made the hair on the back of his neck tingle. "You call that chaos?" she said, stretching with a grace that made his coffee-stained uniform feel like it belonged in a museum of human ineptitude. That was a mere rehearsal. True chaos comes with tea ceremonies, gravity shifts, and holographic cats attacking unsuspecting humans. James choked on an internal laugh. Holographic cats. I swear if this station has holographic cats, I'm resigning. I have standards. She floated closer, hands clasped behind her back, ears twitching in amusement. "You have standards, James. But your capacity for laughing at yourself is commendable. That is important in interspecies bonding protocols." He raised an eyebrow. "Bonding protocols, huh? And here I thought I was just being charmingly awkward." "You are," Kaelara said, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "But charm is negotiable. Humor is essential." She gestured toward a control panel, one of the many scattered around the observation pod. "Come, I will show you something." James hesitated, then floated after her, careful to avoid bumping his elbow into the console that already had a small dent from yesterday's coffee incident. Kaelara tapped a few controls, and a holographic projection sprang to life in the center of the room. It was a three-dimensional map of their sector of the galaxy, stars blinking like distant fireflies. Planets rotated slowly, and a faint line traced a path between them, highlighting gravitational anomalies, trade routes, and what Kaelara described as areas of potential chaos for new visitors. "So you're showing me the galactic chaos map," James said, trying to sound confident but failing as his stomach flipped at the sheer scale of it. "Is that a thing people do for bonding?" "In my culture, yes," Kaelara replied. "Sharing potential hazards and absurdities in the galaxy is a method to establish trust. If you can laugh at the possible ways you might be blown into a nebula, you demonstrate courage and compatibility." James leaned back, floating slightly in zero gravity, imagining the very real possibility of being blown into a nebula. "Well, I've always dreamed of a vacation where I get ripped apart by cosmic winds. It's very romantic." He gave a crooked grin, and Kaelara's ears twitched in what he decided was approval. They spent the morning floating among holographic projections, James pointing out Earth landmarks in his humor-laden way, and Kaelara explaining the quirks of her homeworld, where gravity wells could shift unpredictably, and the local wildlife had a disturbing habit of mimicking speech. James laughed at the image of a tiny, bioluminescent creature perfectly reciting bureaucratic forms in a high-pitched voice while juggling luminescent orbs. "Sounds like my kind of pet," he said, earning a rare chuckle from Kaelara. "Perhaps," she said, "but these creatures are precise. They judge humans harshly. I think they would find your sense of humor alarming." "Alarming? I prefer dangerously witty," James said, puffing out his chest in mock bravado. He nearly floated into a wall, prompting Kaelara to reach out and nudge him back with a precision that suggested she did this often enough to make it look effortless. "Dangerously witty," she repeated, her voice a playful melody, "may indeed save your life, or at least prevent you from accidentally igniting a containment field." Hours passed like minutes. They experimented with the station's zero-gravity gym modules, turning basic exercises into a chaotic ballet. James attempted a push-up, only to float backward into a gravity-adjusted treadmill that reacted unpredictably, sending him spinning in slow arcs. Kaelara caught him mid-spin, holding him by the waist, and quipped, "You humans are hopeless but entertaining." "You're lucky I have this natural charm," James said, still spinning slightly, trying to hide his dizziness. "Otherwise, I'd be a floating cautionary tale for the next visitor." Kaelara laughed, and he noted the subtle glow along the tips of her ears when she did, a biological reaction that he found fascinating and slightly distracting. "I find that charm useful," she said. "It makes chaos more palatable." After the exercise session, they floated into the kitchen module, where James attempted to make a cup of actual coffee rather than yesterday's stardust approximation. Kaelara observed with mild amusement, ears flicking as she commented on the inefficiency of humans trying to brew beverages in zero gravity. "Your methods are entertaining, but I prefer the synthesized nutrients," she said, gesturing to a panel that dispensed liquid meals in neat, calorie-balanced pods. "Entertaining?" James muttered, spilling half the coffee into the air. He tried to catch it with his hands, only to create a floating ring of liquid hovering above the counter. Kaelara's laughter filled the room again, and James realized he might be developing a mild addiction to the sound. "The universe is better with humor," she said, reaching to help him corral the rogue coffee droplets. "Even in chaos, laughter is necessary." By mid-cycle, they had established a routine of chaos, laughter, and small gestures that built trust. Kaelara showed James the station's hidden observation alcoves, places where the artificial gravity could be slightly adjusted to float in slow arcs, watching distant planets and nebulae like children watching fireworks. James learned to anticipate her subtle movements, the twitch of her long ears signaling a joke or a playful warning. They discovered mutual comfort in the absurd. How humans considered spilled coffee a disaster while alien species might see it as a fine art of anti-gravity physics. One afternoon, a minor malfunction in the station's environmental controls triggered an alarm, sending colored lights flickering across the walls. James froze, the remnants of humor battling rising panic. Kaelara grabbed his hand, pulling him into the nearest safety module, and whispered, "See, chaos, still laughable." He laughed nervously. "If I don't, I might spontaneously combust, or float away, or both." Kaelara smiled, the violet shimmer in her eyes reflecting the flashing lights. "Good. Then you understand. Laughing through uncertainty is essential." By the end of the galactic day, James and Kaelara had transformed from tentative acquaintances into partners navigating the station's eccentricities with shared humor and careful trust. They dined on synthesized meals, turned maintenance routines into playful competitions, and laughed at every minor catastrophe that arose, from floating toolkits to misfired cleaning drones. As they settled into a quiet corner of the observation deck that evening, watching a newly discovered pulsar pulse in rhythm with the hum of the station, James realized how profoundly his perception of life had shifted. What had begun as a casual, joking comment about proposals had evolved into something tangible, a bond formed through laughter, shared danger, and the thrill of the unknown. Kaelara leaned close, her ears brushing his shoulder, and whispered, "Tomorrow, more chaos." James grinned. "Absolutely, and I promise to spill less coffee, maybe." Kaelara's laughter, a melody that could harmonize with the stars themselves, filled the observation pod, mingling with James' own chuckles. Between zero gravity, interstellar maps, and accidental culinary disasters, they had found a rhythm, a bridge across species, chaos, and expectation. The galaxy stretched before them in all its unpredictable glory. And for the first time, James felt that the universe's jokes were finally worth laughing at, especially when delivered by a violet-eyed alien woman with ears that could catch even the faintest hint of humor in his voice. The hum of the station was softer that morning, more measured, as though even the artificial intelligence running the interstellar outpost had noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. James floated lazily through the corridor, practicing a series of exaggerated tiptoes that defied all sense of gravity and decorum. Kaelara followed, her long ears tracing subtle arcs in the zero-G air as she laughed, a sound like wind chimes woven from distant stars. She caught his hand mid-gesture, tugging him gently toward the observation deck, and he realized that in the past cycle, holding her hand no longer felt like an experiment in spatial physics, but like the most natural thing in the universe. They entered the deck to find it bathed in the soft glow of a nearby nebula, colors shifting from deep violet to molten gold, casting long, playful shadows along the walls. Holographic projections floated lazily above the consoles, showing energy flows, star charts, and a peculiar alert from the docking bay. One of the maintenance drones had apparently taken the liberty of exploring the station's storage units with unexpected curiosity. James grinned. So, chaos starts early. Kaelara tilted her head, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. And yet, you greet it with humor. I find that impressive. Most humans panic at unexpected anomalies. Impressive, James repeated, floating toward a console to check the alert. Or dangerously unprepared. Maybe both, but we'll call it competence. He tapped a few commands, and the rogue drone appeared on the main display, looping in tight spirals around the storage pods, occasionally bumping into boxes with soft thuds. Kaelara watched, ears twitching in delight. It is oddly entertaining, she admitted. They spent the next hour corralling the drone, turning what could have been a tedious maintenance task into a playful competition. James attempted to anticipate its movements, mimicking its loops with his own body, while Kaelara floated gracefully, her hands extended to intercept the mechanical intruder. At one point, they collided mid-chase, arms tangled, and ended up spinning slowly through the zero-gravity corridor, laughter spilling from both of them until their rotation slowed, and they floated to a gentle halt. You know, James said, brushing imaginary dust from his uniform, I never thought that chasing a drone could feel like training for interstellar marriage. Kaelara tilted her head, the violet shimmer in her eyes reflecting the nebula's glow. Perhaps preparation is always disguised as absurdity. That is how I understand humans anyway. She reached out, brushing the tip of her long ear against his shoulder. And you are learning quickly. James smiled, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with zero-gravity circulation. I'm learning that chaos is inevitable, laughter is mandatory, and your idea of marriage proposals is terrifyingly efficient. Efficiency is a virtue, Kaelara replied, but so is humor. She floated closer, tapping a console to bring up a series of planetary readings. These readings are stable. Our route to the outer systems is safe. No surprises except those we create ourselves. James leaned forward, squinting at the data. Safe except for the self-created surprises, that's comforting. Kind of like dating in zero gravity. Kaelara laughed softly, and he noticed her ears quivering in rhythm with the sound. Yes, like dating in zero gravity, she echoed. The day passed with routines that now felt like rituals of trust. They tested propulsion units together, sharing jokes about interstellar bureaucracy. They mapped star clusters, inventing humorous names for each celestial anomaly. They even attempted a culinary experiment with the station's nutrient synthesizer, resulting in a strange, glowing porridge that they both agreed was surprisingly edible if you ignore the color. By mid-cycle, James realized how much he had changed. The man who once joked to deflect discomfort now found solace in uncertainty, laughter in chaos, and courage in vulnerability. Kaelara had taught him that humor was not an escape but a bridge, a language capable of transcending species, planets, and expectations. His nervous wit, once a shield against awkwardness, had transformed into a tool for connection, a way to navigate both the absurdities of the galaxy and the complexities of the heart. Even the station's crew had noticed. Subtle shifts in protocol reflected a newfound respect for James' adaptability. The engineers consulted him more often. The communications officers smiled knowingly when he made light of a tense transmission, and Kaelara herself had begun to include him in delicate discussions, recognizing that his humor often diffused tension before it could metastasize. As night fell, James and Kaelara settled on a quiet observation platform, the artificial gravity slightly reduced so they could float side by side, drifting in gentle arcs as stars blinked in distant rhythms. Kaelara pointed toward a small blue planet spinning slowly in the light of its sun. "Home," she whispered, "is not just where we were born, but where we choose to connect. You understand this now, yes?" James nodded, tracing his fingers along the console absent-mindedly. "I do, and I choose to connect. With you. With this chaos, this laughter, all of it." He paused, realizing the weight and freedom of his words. "I used to think courage meant standing firm in the face of danger. But now, it's standing here, floating beside you, laughing at the absurdity and still saying yes to everything that comes next." Kaelara's ears twitched, her eyes softening, reflecting the nebula's light. "Then we begin," she said, "truly." The following hours were spent in the delicate choreography of understanding. They reviewed maps, calculated trajectories for potential exploratory missions, and even managed to repair a minor life support glitch together, joking about the improbability of such mundane heroics in zero gravity. Each moment was threaded with laughter and the quiet satisfaction of competence, of trust earned and shared. James discovered that even the most mundane duties could be imbued with levity, and that Kaelara's patience and gentle teasing were as much a lesson as any technical manual. A minor emergency briefly interrupted their calm. A misalignment in the outer communications array sent a flurry of holographic signals flickering across the deck. James froze, panic momentarily flickering in his chest. Kaelara's hand found his, steadying him. "Do you remember what I told you?" she asked, her voice calm, yet filled with that subtle humor that had become his anchor. "Yes, humor is essential," he replied, and they both laughed as they worked together, resolving the array with a combination of technical skill, improvisation, and playful banter. The crisis passed with nothing more than a minor jolt to their pride, and a shared story to recount in the future. By cycle's end, James realized that his relationship with Kaelara was no longer defined by surprise proposals or accidental zero-G collisions. It was defined by trust built in motion, laughter in the face of uncertainty, and courage discovered not in isolation, but in partnership. Their hands, often brushing, sometimes gripping in moments of technical necessity, became a constant reminder of the bond they had forged, a bridge between human whimsy and alien elegance, between chaos and harmony. The station's artificial lighting dimmed for the sleep cycle, leaving only the soft pulse of distant stars and the gentle glow of the nebula outside. James and Kaelara floated side by side, ears brushing occasionally, bodies relaxed, minds attuned to the shared rhythm of their new existence. He reflected on the man he had been, hesitant, joking only to hide discomfort, never imagining that humor could become a lifeline. And he reflected on the man he had become, capable of embracing uncertainty, finding joy in chaos, and accepting love that spanned species, systems, and galaxies. Kaelara turned slightly, her ears twitched in what he now recognized as a signature of her amusement and approval. "Then," she whispered, "the universe is ours." Outside, the stars continued their slow dance, and the station drifted through the nebula, indifferent to species, alliances, or protocols. Inside, however, two beings, human and alien, floated together, tethered by laughter, courage, and the quiet certainty that they had found something extraordinary. Chaos still awaited, as it always would, but they had learned to meet it with humor, trust, and a bond that no cosmic anomaly could sever. James, once a man who hid behind jokes, now stood ready to face the absurd, the unexpected, and the impossible hand in hand with Kaelara. And for the first time in his life, he believed that love, in all its unpredictable and interstellar glory, could truly survive anything. The observation deck fell silent except for the soft hum of life support and the distant pulsing of a faraway star. A gentle reminder that even in the vast, cold expanse of space, warmth could be found in laughter, trust, and the intertwining of hearts across worlds. James exhaled slowly, floating beside her, and realized that endings were only beginnings in disguise. And this story